Hey everybody, my name is Paul Eston Jr., aka Boy Green. I'm the New York Jets digital reporter for Heavy.com. We're streaming live simultaneously in 3 different places here on a Thursday. The Heavy on Jets Facebook page to over 20,000 of you New York Jet fans out there, baby. And my YouTube channel, youtube.com/BoyGreen25. And of course, on the Twitter account, @BoyGreen25 as well. We're going to have a special guest join us here in just a second, but you guys can feel free to get involved on the show. This is a show by the people, for the people. Questions, comments, topics for our guest or for this matchup in general, feel free to throw them in wherever you're watching and we'll get them here on the program. Without further ado, it's time to go behind enemy lines. We do that with a Minnesota Vikings guru, an insider, if you will. His name is Tyler Forness. He is the managing editor for the Vikings Wire. And let's bring him in because we got a juicy matchup on Sunday. Tyler, what's popping, baby?
Not much. It is a good day here in Minnesota, and I am really excited for this Jets matchup. The last time that we ended up playing, it was a little lopsided, 37-17, but we are seeing a very different Jets team, and quite frankly, the Vikings are incredibly different as well.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I have to just say, right off the top, Tyler, this may be one of the best backgrounds we've ever had the pleasure of being graced with the double worn moon Houston Oilers, the uniform that should be still used today, gosh darn, with the Tennessee friggin' Titans, and then that worn moon Vikings. Mwah! Chef's kiss. Beautiful, Tyler.
Well, I appreciate that. Warren Moon is my favorite football player of all time and the most underrated quarterback of all time. If he wasn't a black quarterback in 1979, he would have been a high draft pick. He would have been given an opportunity earlier, but he wasn't, so he had to go up to Canada, and he is one of the most prolific passers in the history of professional football.
And great taste, by the way, Tyler, which I guess is only the natural transition from Warren Moon to maybe another future Pro Football Hall of Famer, Kirk Cousins. Let's get your Kirk Cousins love in there. And it's interesting because there's always forever going to be this tie between Kirk Cousins, the Jets, and the Vikings. I released a clip that got the fans juiced up earlier this week. I shared a clip from his documentary. It's like a 35-second clip. I just grabbed the part out where he got off the phone with his agent and said, the Jets just raised the offer to $30 million per year, 3-year deal, fully guaranteed $90 million. He said, perfect. Now we could go back to the Vikings. And all Jet fans just went, being completely used and part of the free agent negotiations. Hey, that happens every year. But let me ask you first off the results. You guys land Kirk Cousins in the free agency sweepstakes. How has the story been with Kirk Cousins from a Vikings perspective?
Oh, it's been incredibly divisive among the fan base and analysts because, quite frankly, when you just look at the box scores, Kirk Cousins looks like a tremendous quarterback, right? He's got the stats, he's got the completion percentage, the passer rating. PFF really likes him with their grading system. But when you look at the results from a team-wide perspective, and when you watch the games, it doesn't translate. And there's been a lot of frustration where he doesn't show up in big moments. Up until recently, game-winning drives, he's crumbled. He doesn't really thrive outside of structure, which has been a problem considering the interior of this offensive line has been really downtrodden for the better part of 10 years. And then you look at this year, he's really taken a lot of leaps. The team has really embraced who he is because let's just be honest, Kirk Cousins is a dorky dad. Like, he is a 34-year-old guy. I'm a 32-year-old Minnesotan. I'm a dork too. So I can kind of relate to that. And because the team has really embraced him, the camaraderie and the chemistry among all the guys has been absolutely tremendous. You've got Kirk wearing a bunch of chains. The teammates just embracing who he is. Look, he's going to wear New Balances around the grill and jorts. That's just Kirk Cousins. But they embrace it, and they fully accept it and like, hey, wear our chains. Let's have some fun. Let's groove. It's completely different. And then we saw earlier this week on Part of My Take, Kevin O'Connell said that, hey, I will hit the gritty with everybody if we make the NFC Championship game. This season, the Vikings fans have been tortured in a completely different way than Jets fans. The Jets didn't make the Super Bowl for 2 years under Rex Ryan, made it to the NFC Championship game. They were kind of underdogs the whole way up in both of those seasons. The Vikings fans have been built up, and then somebody slits their throat. It's just been absolutely brutal to watch over the course of the last 25 years. But this season feels special. It feels different. And despite what some of the metrics will tell you where, hey, DVOA has them in the bottom 10, look, they're figuring out ways to win games. They're 8-0 in one-score games. And this defense, while it bends a lot, does not allow more than 24 points a game. And outside of their 2 losses, they're allowing less than 20 points a game. This team is figuring it out.
Well, let me ask you a quick follow-up. When the heck did this? So I only saw glances of it. Kirk Cousins doing the dance and the bling. Where did that come from? What was the genesis of that? Where all of a sudden that became a thing, and it seemingly on every additional win, and the Vikings obviously at 9-2 have had a lot of them this year. More bling has been added. I heard him talking about a grill this week at the press conference. Where did that all come from?
The genesis of it was the flight home from London. Christian Darrisaw had a chain, and Kirk Cousins was spotted seeing it. Now, this was initially just supposed to be for the team, and it wasn't supposed to leak out to the internet, but it's the internet. Of course it leaked out. And then gradually, as they were coming back from road games, they would add more chains. And then what you're talking about, where he's shirtless doing the dance, that was coming back, I believe, from Washington, because in the Buffalo game, it was Patrick Peterson who had those 2 key red zone interceptions on Josh Allen that was rocking all the chains. And then when Taylor Heineke did it on the way back from Philly, they nixed it because it's like, oh, this isn't cool anymore. So they're really embracing him, and what he was able to do in that game against New Orleans, coming back from 2 fourth quarter deficits to be able to take that game and win it, I think was a really big deal. And they're figuring it out as a team. And I think that's not something that we would have been able to say in the Mike Zimmer era.
You'll know the stat better than me, Tyler. I know they're 8-0 this year in one-score games. What was the record last year? Because I imagine, if I remember correctly, it wasn't very good in the same circumstances, correct?
No, it was not. They were 6-8. And there's a stat that is used all the time. I can't remember what it's called in the NFL, but Bill Connolly, who does college football writing for ESPN, he created SP+. He calls it second-order wins. It's a stat that basically tells you what your play and what your numbers tell you your record should be, and it does not take in the fact where your actual record is. So some teams just get incredibly unlucky, like the Raiders. Outside of their last 2 wins, which came in overtime, before that they were 0-7 in one-score games. That's an incredibly unsustainable feat. The Vikings are 8-0 on the other side of that genesis, but last year being 6-8, they figured out ways they lost, and they're kind of remedying that. So right now, that record for the Vikings currently sits, I think, at 5.5 wins. That's why a lot of analysts are really down on this team. But what I challenge is you have to watch how they're getting these wins. And because they're figuring out different ways each week, they're not just winning because of luck. They are putting themselves in position to get lucky at the same time. They're putting themselves in positions to win those games outright. Against the Patriots, they forced turnovers. They got timely sacks against Mac Jones. They were able to force an incompletion. Like, it's little nuanced things. And I think because, the national media has such a broad lens, because like you and I, we cover specific teams. Our lens is very narrow. So when we consume the rest of the league, we're not looking at it from that super analytical lens, because we are so hyper-focused on one area. And that's why I think some of the national media just have missed some of those little nuances that the Vikings are utilizing to win, because they have to look at such a big picture, and they're not able to critically analyze every single game in the way we are for our teams. I think this Vikings team is pretty much right where they should be. I think they likely should have 1 or 2 more losses, but they're figuring it out by creating their own luck. And I think that you can utilize some of these things that they've learned and continue to adapt and grow, and they can project that forward and make a real run in the playoffs.
Yeah, see, I think that's the key, Tyler, and that's a very good point, by the way, the difference between national media and us, that we again, that narrow focused lens. But I will tell you that while some people have looked at the Vikings and called that luck like, BS, they're like, the ball is rolled in the other way. I look at it a completely different way. I see that the Vikings have this insane amount of talent, obviously. TJ Hockenson, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, Dalvin, and Danielle Hunter and Patrick Peterson, all these talented guys all over the place. And I say, wow, they're that talented and they're getting the luck. That's almost like a destiny foretold kind of year. Like, wait a second. Maybe it's not just lucky, like, oh, wow, that's unsustainable. I look at it the other way. If they're finding ways to win creatively, the special teams touchdown against New England, that, to me, they're just, every flavor has been different. It doesn't seem like in all these Vikings wins, they're winning in the same way. They're winning in unique ways, which is almost sustainable in its own right, because they continue to find ways to do it.
I think that's fair. And what's really interesting about this team is when those big stars don't necessarily show up. they're able to figure it out throughout the game and then take over. Like if you watch that Patriots game on Thanksgiving night, which a lot of the country did, I think the number was somewhere around like 30 million people watched the game. And it was a great football game. But the pass rush didn't show up until like the final 2 drives. And then they were pressuring the living heck out of Mac Jones. But throughout the game, you saw Mac Jones have a pretty clean and comfortable pocket. He was able to take 3 to 4 seconds to find open guys down the field, and he did just that. You give any capable NFL quarterback that kind of time, you're going to find open guys, and you're going to be able to do some damage. But they were able to figure it out by transitioning how they rush the passer. They stopped focusing so much on Zadarius Smith on their side because the Patriots were making him their focus. And they kind of balanced things out, and that's when you saw them attack at the end. And they did a really good job. I really like the fact that they're able to continue to adapt, but they need to do a lot more of it. And the leadership with those star players that you mentioned has really been the key. Patrick Peterson has stepped up in a major way, both with his on-field play. He is PFF's 5th-ranked quarterback this year. Like, everybody thought he was washed going into Minnesota last year. And he's figured it out because, you know what? When you lose in athleticism, you have gained in intelligence, and you can play a lot smarter without having to worry so much about that athleticism because you just know, hey, my athleticism can't bail me out. I have to play smart football. And he's able to do that. And you have the reemergence of Zadarius Smith and Danielle Hunter, who are both top 10 in pressures. They're able to kind of figure it out. And what's the word I'm looking for? They're able to figure it out with lesser players like cornerback. They were without 3 guys. Compensate. That's the word. They were able to compensate for the fact that they were down 3 cornerbacks. And one of them, Andrew Booth Jr., just got placed on injured reserve with a torn meniscus. And he's officially out for the season because they repaired it instead of trimmed it. Like, they're able to figure it out as a team. And that was not something we saw under Mike Zimmer, just because I don't know if you've heard this. Zimmer hated injured players. Danielle Hunter was out for the season with a neck injury. Didn't talk to him until he was ready to go. Yikes. You had Bill Parcells as your coach. Right. Bill Belichick was there too. That is Mike Zimmer. He is a very talented, very smart, and gifted asshole. Like that's kind of that style. And Kevin O'Connell comes in, and he's incredibly gifted, incredibly smart, and relates well to these guys because he's young. He's 37. He worked with Bill Belichick, and he knows the intelligence, but he also knows the laid-back Los Angeles vibes of Sean McVay, and he's able to kind of maneuver all of that, and it's really working wonders on this team.
Let me ask you about that New England game, because it's interesting. Because for the most part, Mac Jones, to be kind, has looked like a bag of garbaggio all year. I mean, he has not looked like the same Pro Bowl quarterback that he was previously. And all of a sudden against the Vikings, he lit it up like nobody's business. Is that like Mac Jones just naturally having a coming out party, and that was inevitable against whatever team? Or is it like questions with the Vikings defense? Because you mentioned some of those DVOA numbers, and outside of, I think there's one category we looked at ahead of this Vikings-Jets game that the Vikings beat the Jets in, which is weird. So is it the Vikings defense isn't very good? Is it that bend don't break thing that ultimately, because again, Mac Jones put up all those video game numbers, but the New England lost. So what's kind of the balance there? We're trying to understand that heading into this game, where obviously the Jets will have Mike White playing here and seeing some of those secondary numbers that are kind of juicy.
Well, I think it's twofold because, kind of like I said earlier, you put any capable NFL quarterback, like they don't have to be good. They can be Gus Frerotte or Mike White level. Just right. You put a guy who knows how to read a field and he can throw a football, they're going to find guys if you give them a clean pocket and enough time. And Mac Jones did just that. And one of the draws about Mac Jones was his accuracy. And at Alabama, he was not a great thrower. He was a great distributor, because he had elite talent around him, and they were open. They were open all the time. And some of the struggles he's had, he doesn't have those guys anymore. And he's like, I don't have guys that are running like 10 yards wide open. Obviously, that's a little bit of hyperbole, but you understand the point. And guys were open because they were down corners. Have you ever heard of Duke Shelley?
I have only we shouldn't have. Most people should not know who that name is, but yes, I did because of a lot of the injuries and being forced in there for you guys. Yeah.
Well, outside of hearing it because of injuries, nobody's going to hear the name Duke Shelley. And he was the starting cornerback on Thursday night. And they were doing a lot of beaters for what the Vikings like to do, because they were in the Vic Fangio defense, a lot of quarters, a lot of quarter, half, cover 2. And they were running specific plays to put guys in conflict, and they were able to succeed with those. And because they were putting those guys in conflict and getting those deep shots, it was making things a lot more difficult for the Vikings defense and easier for Mac Jones. And I don't read a whole lot into it. They're likely getting a Caleb Evans back because he practiced in full yesterday from a concussion that he sustained against the Buffalo Bills. Cam Dantzler's coming back next week, most likely. Obviously, it won't happen against the Jets, but because of the addition of a Caleb Evans and how this defense has been playing and Mike White kind of being a question mark, we don't know if you're going to get Bills Mike White or if we're going to get a garbage football player. There's a lot of difference between and variance with what Mike White is going to be. So I like what the Vikings are trying to figure out, but this is going to be a very entertaining game.
And by the way, we're speaking of Tyler Forness. He is the managing editor for the Vikings Wire. And guys, if you're watching right now, make sure you show your support. Like the video, hit subscribe down below. And also at that very handle you see on the screen for Tyler, make sure to give him a follow for the Vikings perspective on this as we head into the matchup. Like I said, also get involved in the comment section as well. I have to ask you, Tyler, the Jets are only a 3-point underdog, which Vegas is saying if they played on a neutral field, this would be a pick'em. The Vikings are 9-2. The Jets are, scrub, I guess, are at 7-4. But is there any Vikings people going, what the disrespectful hell is going on here with this line?
There's been a lot of people who have been disrespected by the Vegas lines all year. But should we really be disrespected by the lines considering all the information and deep analytics we know? Like DVOA is a really good benchmark for what the books are thinking because the whole point of DVOA is to project forward. It's not to tell you what you've already done. It's to tell you what you're going to do based on how you've done and how you're going to do moving forward. The DVOA does not view the Vikings very highly because of some of those things we've talked about. They're allowing a lot of yards, but they're one of the best in not allowing red zone possessions, even though they're one of the worst with red zone percentage. They're not allowing teams to get there, but once they get there, they're taking advantage. So it's kind of those little things and all those little metrics, not being able to put teams away, having all these one-score games. Like a 3-point line, it was a 3.5-point line against the Patriots. Despite the Jets losing 2 games to the Patriots, they're very similar teams, and they're both very good. I thought it was maybe a little low. I probably would have put it at 4 because like college football, they use like 2.5, 3 points. In pro football, it's down to like 1.5, 2 for home field advantage. Because as much as it means something, it doesn't mean nearly as much anymore as it used to because there's so much more parity. And we're seeing that around the league. There are one-score games all over the place. You're not seeing many blowouts. Even last year, it felt like you saw a lot more. I don't have like the stat in front of me.
Sure.
You're seeing a lot more close games. And that's because of that parity. So neutral field would be like a 1.5, 2-point Vikings like favorite. I think that's fine. Like we're talking about a very good Jets team that plays tremendous defense. They love Coach Robert Saleh. He has shown them the love back. And he is with Zach Wilson. He did the right thing and said, hey, I'm not going to put up with your shit. You need to sit down. And he sent a message like, okay, you have this team. You have our backs. We have yours. And I think that makes a massive difference. You have great play calling from Mike McDaniel, who comes from Kyle Shanahan. He's going to be a tremendous run game designer because that's just what it gets ingrained to you working for that man. This is going to be a very good game.
And we're hoping so. Let's go with a couple of quickies before we get you out of here, Tyler. First off, lay it to me straight. Tyler Conklin spent his first 4 years over there in Minnesota. He already told us to the New York media he's going to be doing a jersey exchange after the game and getting all the love and dove. Cheered? Booed? What's the reception? How do Vikings feel about Tyler Conklin?
I think the Vikings fans will give him a decent reception. Around here, he gets called Conklin a lot.
Yeah, you told me that. We did an interview a couple of months back. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the big things that I saw with like Conklin's exit, it was amicable. The Vikings just couldn't afford to pay him. It wasn't that they didn't want to. They couldn't afford it. And they had Irv Smith Jr. coming back from the meniscus injury. And he was just, unfortunately, a casualty of finances. And there was no bad blood leaving from the Vikings or Vikings fans. I think it'll be fine. Obviously, like I saw some quotes from Conklin. He didn't necessarily feel disrespected, but a little slighted that he wasn't there anymore. He's going to go in with a little bit of chip on his shoulder and show, hey, this is what you missed. Because obviously the Vikings just traded for TJ Hawkinson. So they saw that they needed to upgrade the position. And he's going to want to show him, hey, you should have just kept me. So I think he's going to come in uber motivated, but I don't think it's going to be a situation where he gets booed out of the building or anything. I think they're going to give him a nice round of applause.
One of the mismatch on paper is something you already hinted at with the Vikings interior, and apparently that's been an issue for a decade plus. To your point, but Quinnen Williams against Sheldon Rankins, he's up in the air. He had the dislocated elbow, so it seems unlikely he'll be able to go. But that's something to watch. But even at the worst case, Quinnen Williams has already 8 sacks this season. That's a career high for him, and he still obviously has the rest of the season to potentially add to that total. Is that the number one matchup you're watching out for, Quinnen versus that interior offensive line? Because, again, Kirk Cousins isn't just in field. So if there was that interior pressure for someone who is even more mobile, maybe they could escape that and make that less of an issue. It seems more of an issue for a guy like Kirk Cousins, who prides himself on this pocket passing as a trademark.
See, that's kind of a layered answer, and I'm going to kind of work through it.
Sure.
I'm worried about Quinnen Williams, but I'm also confident that the Vikings, considering how they adjusted from the Cowboys game to the Patriots game with their pass protection, I'm confident that they're going to be able to at least prevent him from destroying the game. And I think that's the big thing. Now, Ed Ingram leads the league in pressures allowed by a lot, but he's shown a lot of improvement. And even though he struggled, one of the things he struggles with, he oversets too far to the right. So Quinnen Williams will be able to easily take advantage on a quick inside move, but he's had so many wow moments where it's like, he just absolutely annihilates a guy, pancakes, moves to the second level well, stands guys up with ease. So it's not like he's a complete liability, but he has flashes where you can tell he's a rookie. And that can be overly frustrating, but they're going to give him help with Bradbury, who's a top 10 center per PFF this year. They have minimized his flaws so well. He even stood up Jordan Davis when they played the Eagles. Like, he's starting to figure it out, even though he's the same player. The one matchup I'm watching, I want to see what Robert Saleh does to Justin Jefferson. Jefferson cooks cover 1 and cover 3, just annihilates it. And he's been doing it all season, yet teams continue to run it. You saw Bill Belichick run a true bracket coverage with a slot corner and Devin McCourty. Well, he just runs right by him and in between 3 defenders catches the ball. Like, Jefferson is just a special beast. DJ Reed is a very good cover corner. I have a lot of respect for him. Obviously, Sauce Gardner's been tremendous. What will Saleh do? Jefferson lines up usually opposite the side that Sauce Gardner does. So will that be a chess match? Will Gardner follow him? Are they going to play bracket coverage? Are they just going to play normal coverage and try and pressure? Like, that chess match, I think, is going to be the one that you really want to watch. Quinnen Williams is going to get his. He is just that good of a football player, but I don't think he's going to be like, oh my gosh, an Aaron Donald game wrecker special. I think they're going to figure out ways to minimize him. They have the quick passing game. They have the running game, which even though they only got 57 yards last week, they ran the ball nearly 30 times, and it continued to work because play action, those linebackers bit like crazy still. So the Jefferson versus Robert Saleh is the matchup I want to watch more than anything.
Quick follow-up on that. So I've noticed, I wanted to make sure I had the numbers right. There are 3 games in particular where Justin Jefferson has either been neutralized or somewhat marginalized. The Cowboys game, 3 catches, 33 yards. I have it in front of me. The Lions game, weirdly, 3 catches, 14 yards. And then the other one was the Eagles, and they have a really good secondary, Darius Slay and everybody else. 6 catches, 48 yards. Was that based on just specific defense? Does Justin Jefferson sometimes, for as fantastic as he is, you can mirror those stats with 139 against the Patriots, 193 against the Bills, and all these other numbers? There have been a lot of games, obviously, that he's killed, including Green Bay to kick off the year. But in these games that he disappears, is there some level of commonality? Does sometimes his game disappear? Is it the offense? For the play calling in those specific scenarios, like what went wrong in those games? Is that something that could just happen on occasion for Justin Jefferson?
The game plan to beat the Vikings is incredibly simple. Cover with man coverage and get an elite pass rush. It's that easy. Wow. Problem is, not a lot of teams can do that. The Eagles did. Right. They were able to torch the Vikings, and Darius Slay had a tremendous game against Justin Jefferson. He owned him. And he got 2 interceptions to his credit. Like, he was dominant against honestly, the best receiver in the game, and in my opinion, an MVP candidate in Jefferson. The Lions sold out everything to stop Jefferson. They were double and triple teaming him and leaving everybody in simple man coverage to be like, no, if you're going to beat us, it's not going to be Jefferson. So they figured out a way to beat him. The Cowboys, it was Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, Dorrance Armstrong. They got an elite pass rush. They had stuff open all day because they were running a lot of Zeus coverage. So it's a lot of like quarters, cover 3, and it's like bracket stuff. And they were able to find like deep hitches, deep digs that were open consistently. Problem is Cousins couldn't get him the ball because he was under so much duress. And if you're able to do that, you're able to beat the Vikings. Well, can the Jets do that? That's going to be the big question. I like a lot of their pieces on the defensive line, but the thing is, I don't think anybody's at a truly elite level. You can argue Quinnen Williams is, and I think that's a very good discussion for another day, but I don't think Carl Lawson is. John Frankenmeyers is a very good player, but I wouldn't call him elite either. And Sheldon Rankins is an okay pass rusher, but I wouldn't consider him like a lethal threat on the inside. So I don't think they're going to be able to duplicate what the Eagles or Cowboys did. And I think that gives a lot of ability for what the Vikings like to do, which is push the ball in that deep intermediate part of the field, 10 to 15 yards. And that's where they do most of their damage.
Yeah, for the Jets side of things on that, Justin Jefferson conversation, which you talked about earlier, the Jets like to play sides for the most part, but they do travel. Sauce in the Ravens game is an example back in week 1. He actually shadowed Mark Andrews, their tight end. So there are occasions where Robert's always a lot more flexible than he's been in years past in terms of that defensive philosophy. So obviously that'll be something to watch. The good news is the Jets have such high level of confidence. DJ Reed, obviously in his first year with the Jets, has been doing so well that they don't feel like they always have to, shadow guys and lockdown guys because they have confidence in both, that sometimes they're cool with riding the sides. But obviously, Justin Jefferson, a special player that got a lot of special remarks from Robert Saleh during his press conferences this week, will certainly get the attention, I'm sure, of the New York Jets staff. Let me ask you this, and in closing, as we'll get you out of here. The Jets, when they score more than 18 points a game, I think that's a number, the Jets are undefeated. And the Jets defense has done a really good job of holding teams down. Is there a number for the Vikings if they keep teams under this, or if they score at least this, that the Vikings have had sustained success this season in that 9-2 supply and track record that we have thus far?
I'll be honest, I don't really think you can extrapolate anything from the Vikings numbers. Their 2 losses, they got absolutely torched. They've scored a total of 10 points in their 2 losses. Anytime they've hit double digits, they're 9-0. And they haven't scored less than 23 points all season in their wins. So, because their 2 losses have been such blowouts, and you really can't extrapolate really anything because they just played so piss poor. Yeah. I think if the Vikings end up having a decent offensive game, the Jets could be in real trouble because we just don't know what Mike White is going to be. Is Michael Carter going to play with that mid-ankle sprain? What is the running game's been tremendous for the Jets this year? Are they going to be able to sustain it with backups? Like, there is so many variables. It's like a big algebra problem because you don't know what X, Y, Z, Q, and R are. And then once you figure those out, then you can really piece it together. Unfortunately, I don't have a great answer for you because with the Vikings scores this year, you can't really extrapolate anything other than they stunk.
Right. Well, let me talk about one of those variables. Christian Darrisaw, what's your gut say on whether or not he plays? And if not, who the heck is playing in his place?
To my knowledge, he's not going to play. He did not practice yesterday. In the media portion of practice today, they haven't released the injury report, but he was not on the field. He's dealing with a second concussion in 8 days. He exited the protocol relatively easily after that Buffalo game. And then on a bull rush in the second quarter, he kind of got a little bit of a crown of the head to the face mask, and he suffered a second one. So they're taking it very easy with him. You're going to see a lot of Blake Brandel, 6'7", 315, third-year offensive lineman from Oregon State, picked in the 6th round. If he's the kind of guy where if he locks you up, you're done. You can beat him easily with speed. He does not have the athleticism or foot quickness to be able to keep up with speed rushers. And he has a tendency to then overset and can be beaten inside with a counter move. I think Carl Lawson could have a field day kind of playing with him. But the Vikings, to their credit, they have done a great job of shifting protection over to help him, and they've given him help with tight ends and running backs too. He only allowed 1 pressure against the Patriots, and it was a sack where Josh Uche just beat him one-on-one with that pressured on the far outside shoulder and then spin move inside and sack Kirk Cousins. So Brando's he's what you want out of a backup offensive lineman. He's not going to be a liability, but you can take advantage of him in spots if you see the right opportunities.
And I'm seeing this, not that one. We have, oh, here it is. Tyler looks like a Viking. So you're getting a lot of that
Yeah.
in the comments. Excellent. So let's take us home with a prediction. We always force whatever guest is joining us to give us one. A fascinating game. I think we've got a lot of great games, quite frankly, on this weekend slate. 1:00 game. We have Jets Vikings. There was always the hint that it could be flex to prime time. It will not be. It is straight up in Minnesota, home, and a third straight home game, I think, for you guys. How do you see this playing out? What's your prediction for this contest?
Like, I think this can go a lot of different ways, but I'm going to lean Vikings here. I think it's going to be like a 27-17 type of game. I worry about Mike White's consistency because he's never been able to show that. He has peaked and he has valleyed. He just had a peak last week. Obviously, you're going against a really depleted Chicago Bears secondary. You're playing in the rain. The team is all fired up. There's a lot of emotion because of the whole Zach Wilson thing. And there was hey, we believe in you, Mike White. Well, now it's part two. Part two is always going to be harder than part one in these situations, especially because they didn't have a lot of tape on Mike White going into the game. Now the Vikings have an entire game where they can look at Mike White and watch what he does in the pocket, how he reacts to things. And I think Ed Donatel is going to be able to figure it out. You're also going against a much better pass rush, a better secondary, a better group of linebackers. You're just going against a lot better players. And even though you had great games from Garrett Wilson, Elijah Moore showed up from beyond the grave, thankfully. It took way too long. That's a whole nother story that I know you guys have been dealing with. But I just think that there's too much for the Vikings. And I still think the Jets, while they're a great team and they should make the playoffs and potentially make some noise, they're 1 year away. And I think that shows up in Minnesota. Vikings take it, but it's going to be a very competitive game nonetheless.
And we're looking forward to it. And then the one other angle, of course, we didn't mention as we're signing off here, is Kevin O'Connell, former traded Jets quarterback, Kevin O'Connell, that is. And so, again, him at the helm, I got to say, I've been wildly impressed what he's been able to do, obviously record-wise. But, you know, Mike Zimmer had his way, which is probably the best way to put it. And Kevin O'Connell has his. And getting immediate success like that for O'Connell with this group and a chance to potentially make a run, which I'm sure Vikings fans have been, craving, praying, and dying for, and to put that up there could be pretty magical. So, Tyler, I want to thank you so much for carving out the time. This was fantastic. And first off, before we get you out of here, let people know where they can read more of your Vikings coverage, hear, listen, podcast, everything else, where they can hear it leading into Sunday, because this has been a fascinating and unique perspective.
Well, I appreciate that, Paul. You can find me on Twitter at @TheRealForno. I am the manager of USA Today's Vikings Wire. We just started a series, 25 Skulls of Christmas, where I just look at 25 different moments, plays, players that just bring joy to Vikings fans. I'm also a college football prognosticator and betting expert for fantasy points. We're about to release our bowl guide for $20. You're going to get a ton of great content and the ability to win a lot of money. We've had guys with our daily fantasy experts win $6,000 in a weekend. So I don't like to toot our horn, but we're pretty good at what we do. And then I also host my own show, The Real Forno Show, Monday nights at 6 p.m. Central on the Climbing the Pocket YouTube channel. We're associated with the Daily Norseman of SB Nation. This past Monday, I talked a little bit about this game. We talked about the Patriots game. If you want some more Vikings perspective, I highly recommend you give that a look, because I feel like we do a pretty good job of trying to be completely objective, because the one thing I don't like is being a fanalist. I like to be an analyst that's a fan. And I hope you feel like you got that from me today. And I'll just be honest, I'm really excited for this game here this weekend.
As am I, Tyler. I think that was well said. That's exactly what I think we need more of is, again, fans that are analysts that can give you that fan perspective, but also kind of the step back approach of honest evaluation of what we're going to see. I hope it's as good of a game as it looks like it's going to be. Tyler, thank you so much for joining us, man.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
There he is. Make sure you guys follow him at The Real Forno on Twitter. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you next time.